Yeah, the worst bomb would have been so before Old Kid, I was in a band called Sunriser. This would have been a night where I had not found my way towards grace. I'd say there's only two or three times in my whole life where I'd say I was maybe a little too drunk on stage. And I remember the sound person, and this is what sticks with me, and this is why I think it's the biggest bomb. The sound man came up and he was so genuine. He said, and he was just so disappointed. He said, I was looking forward to working with you guys so much. And no soundman before or since had ever said anything. I wish he had said it while we were setting up. I'm looking forward to, because I would have been like,
Yeah.
let's. And then after, and it just, my heart sank. And then you have
Uh,
all that. And then, of course, the next day, I don't know if you get these metaphysical hangovers the way I do, but the guilt, just the anxiety is just, and the next day, it's just, oh, we're the worst.
It's Johnny Late Night! And now here's your host, Johnny Rogers!
Welcome everyone to the Johnny Rogers Show. It's a YouTube show, but it's also a podcast, and it's also a chance for me to promote my new comedy shows. I'm very excited to announce that I'll be running a brand new show in Ottawa called Stand Up Comedy Near Me, and that'll be happening on the last Sunday of every month, starting January 29th at Margarita on Bank Street. I'm going to be putting together some incredible lineups featuring the funniest that North America has to offer, so make sure you hit that subscribe button, that way you don't miss out on the ticket link. Now with that out of the way, I have to tell you about my guest today on the podcast. 10 years ago, he abandoned his post as the lead singer of the Toronto indie band called Sunriser. He filled his hockey bag with what little he had left and fled to the safety of his sister's spare room in Manchester, England. There he spent most of his time reading, recharging, and whether he knew it yet or not, soaking up the intrinsic creative atmosphere in one of the world's most innovative cities. After nearly a year there, his mind was made up and he was just going to go back to school. In Los Angeles, he studied creative writing at UCLA, seemingly stepping away from music for good this time. 2 years later, he found himself traveling the world for his first book, a travel memoir titled Pride in Travel. With some early success in writing, it looked like his days in music were retired to just a memory. But sometimes the universe has a funny way of luring us back to our first love. An unexpected meeting with an old friend at a determined record label in Canada and a decade of new experiences meant the time to record new music had once again hooked him. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further delay, here is my conversation with musician and author Darryl Webster, aka Old Kid. I always hit record so I never forget to do that because
Yeah, I gotcha.
plenty of conversations where I used to do podcasts in person before, Zoom
Yeah.
became a thing. And there'd be so many times where I thought I hit record on my laptop and then it's just
Yeah.
missed.
Oh man, there's been times where I'm doing stuff where I'll write record in huge letters just on like one piece of paper and put it in front, just be like simple as that, like you're doing a song idea or something. It's like, yeah, hit record. Because that's
Yeah.
always the best take is never recorded.
Oh yeah, 1,000% all the time.
Yeah.
I remember I think it was Tommy Chong who was talking about it. They were like recording one of their albums, and I guess like Cheech had come to the door, but the door was locked, and Tommy just decided he was gonna record him fucking with him basically. So
Yeah.
he turned on a tape recorder and he's like, "Who is it, man?" And he
Yeah.
was genuinely getting angry on the other end. And
Yeah.
then when he played it for him, they're like, "We should like just recreate this and make it better." And then they decided like, no, the fact that he didn't know he was being recorded is
Yeah.
what made it even better almost.
Yeah. Oh, spontaneous stuff's always the best. Almost always the best.
Almost. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There's like
Yeah.
a little filter sometimes that it has to
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
fit through. I just want to. I usually will record like an intro for you over top of this, and
Yep.
then kind of like lead into the episode. But most of the episodes I've been doing is based around like a word. So it doesn't. The whole episode doesn't have to be like that word, but I find it's always like a good spot to not only like title the episode as something, could be a favorite word, could be something that describes maybe something you're going through right now, or
Yeah.
if you had to, what was like a word that comes to mind?
Just like a favorite word,
Just
or
just like a
I think
word.
my
Yeah. There's sometimes there's
two
words that
favorite
just
words.
like stick out,
Yeah, I think grace is my favorite word. Grace is my favorite word. And my most important, I guess, word, or if we're talking about a characteristic, I always think kindness is very, I think if things are surrounded, if things are rooted in kindness, you can't go too far wrong.
No, I
You can
love
go
that too.
broke. You can
You could go broke. Yeah.
Yeah, but you can't go too far wrong. So yeah, but I would say grace in terms of my favorite word would be grace, and
I like
maybe
grace.
yeah.
Yeah, tell me more about like the word grace,
Well,
what
it
that
was,
means to you.
there's just a few different things. It was my aunt's name was Gracie. She was much older than I was growing up, but that was sort of my first friend I remember, like my first really close friend. I loved my aunt. I really loved my aunt Gracie, and she was very playful, and she always so it always sticks out with me that her name was Gracie, and I always loved that. And then just I think just more as you think about the layers of that word, and what goes into the word grace, and just I think for me it's important a lot of the times about is my knee sticking in the way of that.
You're
I
good,
just
man.
realized I'm like, are you having a good chat with my knee? Yeah, I just think so much of life for me is sort of how you handle things, and grace is always one that I come back to. As I said, kindness too, but grace and kindness, I think if you have those two things, they're not always easy. I could tell you I lacked that Sunday watching certain sports. It's not always there, but yeah, I think it sort of started resonating with me when I figured out that my Aunt Gracie's name was also a word, and
Hmm.
then thinking about that word meant, and it's funny when you ask that. That's just sort of the one that popped into my mind.
No, I love that.
Yeah,
And like I said, it doesn't have to take over the whole conversation, but I like
yeah,
it as like a starting point, at least for me as
yeah,
an interviewer. And like there is something that we admire about people too that like are graceful, like people always say,
yeah.
"Oh, that was very graceful of them to like,
Oh yeah,
get."
I'm not saying, I'm certainly not saying I achieve grace, but
Yeah, no.
I think what you're saying is excellent, that we admire grace. So
Yeah.
yeah,
But
I admire grace quite a bit. I wouldn't, boy, I'll tell you, anyone who knows me, I don't think graceful would be, I don't think that would be a word on the
what I
tip of their
like
tongue,
about
but
it,
yeah,
what I like about like grace, being grace, like, or sorry, I'm getting tongue tied here, but like acting with grace or being graceful, and doing
yeah,
something is that's almost something that you actually like can work towards being better at. Like I'm realizing that more and
yeah,
more with
yeah,
some descripting
yeah,
words like that. We used to always think that like, oh, if somebody is just that way, like, but what I've started to realize more and more is a lot of how you are and how you project yourself is how you define yourself, right? Like
mm,
when someone decides that they want to be a runner, they just get up every morning and start running. And
yeah,
then there's no compromise. They just call them, I'm a runner now. This is what a runner does
mm,
is they get up in the morning and they go running. And then suddenly that's their identity. And then it becomes a strength even at that point because they just decided. It's like when you're going to sleep, you like first
mm,
have to pretend that you're going to sleep and then you
yeah,
actually go to sleep, right?
yeah.
People.
It's not that easy for me. I wish sleep were just, I'm going to decide to go to sleep. Ta-da.
I
I'll,
feel blessed in that regard. I could just
yeah,
knock
no,
out.
I've never been a champion sleeper, but
Have you tried marijuana, my
oh
friend?
yeah, tried a good few many recommendations. Podcasts have been a godsend. Podcasts have been, I
Oh
find,
yeah,
great for
throw on like
sleeping.
NPR or something. Just
Yeah, all sorts of stuff. Just anything that's like, yeah, it's funny. Like anything I really want to stay awake for, I'll fall asleep.
oh
You know,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and if it's something just banal and not, I'll I'll stay awake forever. But I don't know. I don't know why that is, but yeah, I'm getting better as the years go by. I'm getting better at sleep.
And I want to like also because I'll talk about some of it in the
Cool. I'm also going to do
intro.
this while you're doing that. I'm going to do
Yeah,
this hide.
I
Oh
found
no.
this
Okay, I'm just going to
this
do this hide self view because it's always distracting when you have that self view on. There
Oh
we go.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Then you kind of looking at yourself. You're like, "How's my hair? Does this look weird?"
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah.
point out your knee, you're getting all insecure about your
Yeah,
knee.
exactly, exactly. It'll take you out of the chat.
I don't know why I had that problem when I mean, it's because I started stand up comedy like a long time ago, like probably
Oh yeah.
11, 12 years ago. And I was always, every time I would watch footage of myself to like fix the jokes, I
Yeah.
was always so
Yeah.
concerned about how I looked. And then I
Mm,
was like, I gotta stop giving a shit.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, it's interesting you mentioned stand-up comedy. I find that to be, not that I've done it, but I think that's the most difficult of the arts. And I would say that in my life, it's been, I'd say, one of the most important of the arts. In
Interesting.
terms of, yeah, I used to always think like, but think about like, if you're having a tough go, the right comedy special, especially when somebody hits on what's bothering you, and
Mm-hmm.
you think, oh, this isn't the topic I want to talk about, but some comedians will, you're like, oh, that's exactly what I need to laugh at. You think everything's overwhelming. It's like, I need to laugh at being at that, whatever's overwhelming me. But I always
Yeah.
thought about the stand-up comic, like when I think about being in a band, you have your bad nights, don't you? You might show up to a town and four people show up, and you go up, and sometimes you play a great show, or sometimes you have a bad show. Sometimes it was packed, sometimes there was nobody. But if there was nobody, or if it was a bad show, you went through it with your
Yeah,
friends and
yeah,
your
yeah.
colleagues, and then you commiserate about it, or you celebrate it. And I always thought, with stand-up comedy, imagine you've had a bad day, you roll into a town, 4 or 5 people there, and you got to be funny,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
Oh
then
yeah.
afterwards you're commiserating with yourself, or you're going back to your own hotel room, or I always thought that must be so difficult, and to stick with it. And when I hear stories of how long, like comics, I think are similar to music in a way, how you're these like 10-year overnight success stories.
Yeah, yeah,
Because,
that's usually how it
oh, here's this
goes.
brand new comic. You're like, no, he's he has done this show 1,000 times. It's just like last month people started listening.
Yeah,
So
that's
always I
really what it
really
is.
really really admire stand-up comedy, the art of it, and its importance.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. Like those are very kind words from you because obviously I view your what you do in music the exact same. Like I was listening to your stuff and I was like, this is great. Like you have
Oh,
such a
thanks, man.
great, unique sound, man. Like for real. And I want to get into like who your influences and stuff are,
Sure.
but with comedy, I know what you're saying. There it seems like there's this isolating factor because each
Yeah.
comedian is coming up with different jokes, but there for most comics, I can't speak for all comics, so at least for myself, like I've always found that at least the comedians in the scene are
Mm.
kind of like your band, if you will,
Oh,
because
okay. Yeah.
there
Yeah.
there there used to be this thing where comedians were really competitive with each
Mm.
other, and if somebody got something, it meant they were
Mm.
taking that thing away from
Mhm.
you. But now it's like everybody's their own distributor, like everyone is their own
Yeah.
label, everyone's success is dependent on themselves, so now there's
Yeah.
become more of a collaborative
Yeah.
like instinct that's happening where it's like, oh, if I do a sketch with you in it and we both share it to our audiences, we'll both like lift ourselves up and there's
Yeah.
no kind
Yeah.
of spot missing. So I'm happy to see that that is changing. And
Yeah.
yeah, I remember
I'm
I
happy to
told
hear that
some.
too, because now I'm glad to hear that, you got, you sort of, the community is, that is
Yeah,
nice to say. Like, I guess, yeah, you're right, because you would have a few other acts at the same show who had the same crowd to deal
they
with, and
bomb too.
same
Yeah.
experience. Yeah.
It's nothing
It's
better
good
than
to
a
hear that
shared
side of it.
bomb.
Yeah.
The best thing that I would love too is like if the crowd was really bad and people always say like there are no bad crowds, there's always only bad
Mm.
comedians. I'm like,
Oh, there's terrible
dude,
crowds.
there's
I can say
terrible
in music, there's
crowds.
terrible crowds.
If there's two
Yeah.
people on their cell phone
Mm.
not paying attention and it's midnight, that's a terrible
Yeah.
crowd.
Oh,
Like
yeah. Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
done those shows. That's a bad
Yeah, we
crowd.
played once. We played in Brooklyn,
Ooh, what's your worst
and
bomb?
oh man, this one wasn't a bomb. It wasn't really our fault. It was just, and we'd met some people earlier in the day, I think, or we had a day off in between. We had 2 shows. I think we had one show in Manhattan and one in Brooklyn, or something like this. And on our off day, we went out and see the city and enjoy ourselves, and met some people like, oh, you have to come to our show tomorrow. And someone was like, oh, no one's coming to that show. We're like, yeah, well, okay. They're like, it's the series finale of The Sopranos.
Oh my god.
And it was just in that city. They just lived and breathed. They're like, everybody in this city. I'm like, it's supposed to be the city that never sleeps. They're like, it will tomorrow. Tomorrow it'll be the quietest thing. Like everyone's gonna watch The Sopranos, and everyone did.
Wow.
Everyone did, yeah. And it took me years to be able to watch, you know,
You
and
were
I
like
watched.
had this
Yeah, I was
resentment
like,
against.
oh, it is such a good show, but it's just like you have those memories of yeah. So that wasn't a bomb. Yeah, the worst bomb would have been, um, oh gosh. So before Old Kid, I was in a band called Sunriser, and we, as we talked earlier about grace, and this would have been a night where I had not found my way towards grace, but we were playing. You're always short of money, aren't you? Indie bands and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So we had really well-intentioned management and PR who were looking to get us sort of these one-off corporate shows, and we'd played a couple, and they hadn't gone great. And then I was like, this is the last one. I can't do these, and it was going late, and there's, you know, and I was never one to. We would have fun. We would like to go out for a drink and all that stuff, but we were pretty good about leaving that till after the show, being
Hmm.
pretty professional. And this was just one show where probably I probably had I'd say there's only 2 or 3 times in my whole life where I'd say I was maybe a little too drunk on stage. And we bombed, and that was largely couldn't blame the corporate event and be like, "Nah." And I remember the sound person, and this is what sticks with me, and this is why I think it's the biggest bomb. Because afterwards, and sound people can be sometimes, maybe unfairly, they've got a reputation that they can be curmudgeonly. And I don't know if you find that in stand up as well, if there are,
I've met a few, yeah,
promoters
sound
or a sound
engineers who
or
are curmudgeons.
yeah, yeah. And look, in fairness to them,
Yeah.
man, they see and hear a lot. I am sensitive to their job. But you just kind of think like and at the end the sound man came up and he was so genuine. He said, and he was just so disappointed. He said, I was looking forward to working with you guys so much. And no sound man before or since had ever said anything. I wish he had said it while we were setting up. I'm looking forward to, because I would have been like,
Yeah.
let's. And then after, and it just, my heart sank. And then you have
Uh,
all that. And then, of course, the next day, I don't know if you get these metaphysical hangovers the way I do, but the guilt, just the Hangxiety is just, and the next day it's just his voice in my head. I was so, and it's just
no.
like, oh, we're the worst. And it's funny too, like I say, like all proudly, like I've probably really only been too drunk on stage 2 or 3 times. But if somebody, I think in the real world was like, yeah, I've only gone into work drunk a couple of times, you'd be like,
Yeah,
you should
that's
never be going,
it's a good way to look at
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I do remember there was a comedian who said that. I can't remember who it was. Some comic in LA, and he someone asked him why he doesn't drink like at
Yeah.
shows, and he was
Yeah.
like, I'm working.
Yeah.
Like
Exactly.
I'm
Yeah.
getting paid to talk on the stage. Like you wouldn't
Yeah.
drink at your job. Why I'm not
No.
going to drink at my job.
Yeah.
And it's
And afterwards,
actually
and
a good
yeah,
approach.
I think similar to somebody who maybe works more of a regular job, likes to come home. Like I can think of some of my friends who be like, they come home from work and they want a beer, and they say, oh, I need to unwind, I have a beer. I find after a show, yeah, after a show, would love a beer, but
Oh
not
yeah.
not before.
Yeah,
But it's
yeah.
funny. It's yeah, it's funny to think. Um, and I think with the old kid stuff, maybe because I started that when I was older and less kid.
Mm.
Been
It's interesting, yeah,
Yeah, there's
right.
definitely never been drunk for an old kid show. After an old kid show, but never before. Yeah,
Tell me about where the name Old Kid comes from.
man, it's gonna be funny saying this, but I started the old kid. So after Sunriser, I was probably about 30 or 31, and just feeling. I feel like music, some of the arts unfairly make us feel old
Mm.
before we are. And I don't know if you find this in stand-up comedy. I do in music. I don't in writing. I think writing's almost the opposite. I almost think your age, if you're too young, people can look at that a certain way
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
writing. Not so in music, there always seemed to be this unfair ticking clock, like and I think that's changed in the last 10 years. Maybe I'm trying to convince myself that's changed because now I'm in a different
Yeah, yeah,
demographic,
yeah.
right?
You're
Maybe,
like, well,
but I
now they want the
remember,
old guys.
right. But I remember being younger, just feeling this ticking clock and thinking that by 30, well, you can't really be in an indie band. Like you've had your chance and now that's
Yeah, I
gone
definitely feel
away.
that.
And
Yeah.
then I gave it a couple of years and then just thought, well, I guess I better start doing singer-songwriter stuff. That's what you do when you're old, isn't it? Old, 30, like 31, whatever I
Yeah.
was. It's ridiculous to, think now. And it was just that feeling of this, that very, that sense of like, but I don't feel old. I've just been made to feel
Mm-hmm.
old for whatever reason. And I'm sure I'm partly to blame for that. And I'm sure also this culture of whatever whatever time that was in music that you're made to feel. And I think there's other jobs, I think there's other facets of the arts where you're probably made to feel old
Oh yeah,
when
like
you're still
acting is a
extremely
big
young.
one.
Acting,
Uh,
yeah, yeah,
I can't.
yeah,
So there's this show on Crave called Dark Side of the '90s, and there
yeah,
was one. I can't remember what the show was that they were talking about. There was some like teen drama show that they were talking about on one of the episodes, and the actress who was playing like supposed to be playing like a 16-year-old, she was
mhm,
actually 30, and she
right,
had lied. She had lied to the
mm,
directors and the casting director about her
yeah,
age because she looked younger and she could get the role. Well, it got leaked somehow that like she was
mm,
older, and
yeah,
they basically like wrote her role down in the show
yeah,
because they're like, we can't have you displaying as a 17-year-old when
mm,
everyone knows you're actually 30. It's going to take away the believability. And I was like,
yeah.
that's such a she's acting, who gives a fuck,
This,
you know what
yes,
I
this
mean?
is sort of the
But
idea.
that was the time, and I think like
Yeah,
that whole period of the 80s and 90s of where pop culture really got to like
yeah,
thrive. There was kind of these unwritten rules that were like set and established in everyone's minds that was at least like trying to come up in any type of industry in the entertainment world.
yeah.
And it's just now we're at the point where it's just like, who cares, like
I
just
yeah, yeah, that's where I like to think. Like as I
yeah,
said, I hope I'm not convincing myself just
yeah.
because I am more old than kid now. But yeah, that's how it felt. It felt just like it was that sort of contrast
Yeah.
between old and kid and that
I-
strange middle ground and that strange feeling of being made to feel old but not
yeah,
feeling old.
I
I think
got
it's
you.
yeah, that's sort of where it came from. I don't remember the day. I don't remember the moment. I wasn't trying out a bunch of different
Yeah,
names.
you
Just
just
I just
introduced
remember it.
yourself one day. Hey, I'm old
Yeah,
kid.
yeah, maybe it might have been, might have been. I was probably hungover. I was probably
You're at a
hungover, and
show
everyone be
signing
like, "I
up. They're
feel,
like, "What's your name, kid?"
yeah, I
Old
feel
kid.
100. I feel 100. Yeah,
When they
exactly.
do the biopic.
Well, and I moved to Manchester before that.
Before
Um,
that period?
yeah, after Sunriser, I moved to Manchester in with
How
my.
was that? Talk about that because I saw that in
It
your
was
bio. That's what I wanted to
yeah,
go through here.
it was one. It was. I think it's one of the best things I ever did. It's just the city is magic. The people are magic. For me, I know we were going to talk about influences too. Bang, like right
Yeah.
there, like that is to me. That would be as someone who's I would say not particularly religious. That would be my pilgrimage.
Mm.
And I've got lots of family there, so it was nice to be able to live there and just day to day, not the tourist thing, but just be immersed in that. And that was great. And a lot of the times they'll call you our kid,
Ah, okay.
our kid and stuff like that. So you would hear that from time to time. And I sometimes wonder if that stuck. I started writing a lot of the early old kid stuff in Manchester. And I wonder if maybe that was somehow in the consciousness, or you hear things over and over, you just hear the way they greet each other and this kind of stuff. So sometimes I wonder if that might have been the beginnings of it, because they're
Yeah.
pretty close.
I no, I could definitely see that as well. I think
Yeah,
there's tons of things that start to form new ideas later on
yeah,
that you can, look at and analyze and be like,
yeah.
oh, this is just a collection of the things I did in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And
Oh
it's just
yeah.
formulated into this new
Yeah.
idea for myself.
I think too, I think I'm someone who's really easily influenced by a new place or a new experience.
Mm.
And like and other people, like for instance, my sister has lived in Manchester for I think over 20 years now. She's now hit that point where she's lived in Manchester longer than
Wow.
she would have lived in Canada. And she has not a hint, well, maybe here and there, but barely a hint of an accent. Like if still when she's out in town, people will ask, "How long are you visiting?" It's just like 20 years, you know.
You know, it's
But if
funny. I
I'm
don't want
over,
to interrupt you. I
yeah,
know a girl who went to England for
yeah,
like school or something, and
mhm,
it wasn't even that long. And she
sure,
came back with like a slight
yeah,
British accent, and I was like,
yeah, dude.
"Do
See,
you
here's the thing,
really?"
man. That's
I
my.
was like,
It'll wear off for me. But that's me. Like if I'm there for like 10 days, especially if
"Yeah,
I'm out at the pub and it's
yeah."
like with friends from there. Oh
It's
man,
interesting
yeah,
that we do that as humans. Like it's almost a way to
yeah.
be like, I'm just like
It's an
you.
assimilation, maybe.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I
it's
wonder.
it's
Yeah, yeah,
definitely like almost a subconscious, I would say, like
yeah,
just like you want to sound like the people are around you so that you can like
yeah,
fit yourself in, you know?
yeah.
It's like a defense mechanism basically when you think
It could
about
be.
it
Yeah,
in a
I get
way.
it. But my sister doesn't get it whatsoever.
Yeah.
It cannot affect her. You know,
Wow.
it can't, it's so it's really interesting how for some people it is, and some people, and I hate it. Like honestly, because I can feel myself when I do it,
I could hear
and
a
I
bit
would
of
come back,
twang in your voice when it comes to that
man.
British twang.
The other thing is too, like I'm from East Gwillimbury,
Okay.
Ontario, which is about an hour and change north of the city. So sometimes if I get excited talking to you, there's a little bit of that Canadian hoser
Yeah, yeah. Canadian hoser.
twang can come out too. So yeah, it's all a bit muddled, but you
No,
know,
but that,
it's
again,
similar
dude,
to the
it's
old kid, right?
yeah.
It's this whole identity crisis. You live other places and exposed to other cultures and ways of
Mhm.
speaking, and some of them are very addictive.
So let's get into your influences that kind
Yeah.
of push forward your sound and your music and your writing. Like, who would you say are like your top three?
Oh man, it's so hard to think. Like I think when you're young, those are such formative years. Like when you're learning instruments and you're learning music and you're learning other people's songs. So I think early it was bands like Teenage Fan Club, early Oasis, that kind of stuff. The first Supergrass album was a very big influence. I Should Coco, that was a very, very big influence. And I heard that album. They sold the NME, and again, being from a small town, we would go into Newmarket for there's a town called Newmarket, which is it's kind of the first like bigger town or known. It's kind of the end of the Toronto suburbs.
Hmm.
That's where we would drive in to buy music.
Okay.
And they would sell the NME and it was $10. Remember that? $10 for the NME. But Supergrass were on the cover and the cover just looked amazing. And I bought that album sight unseen, just being like, well, and that album was a massive one.
Wow.
Then I would say the next sort of period became that sort of Canadian period with stars, Set Yourself on Fire, the early metric stuff, the early stuff from Stills. When Canada started to have that shift, when we moved out of um, I don't want to say that this was our music, but we were more known for the sort of pop stuff, I would say.
Yeah.
Shania Twain, Bryan Adams, this is when you would travel. These are the artists people would, if you're talking about Canada and music, this. Then all of a sudden, the early 2000s, that broken social scene, that stars, Set Yourself on Fire, it's still got to be, if I had to choose a favorite album, it just has everything.
Wow.
So there was that. And then, of course, like we talked about the Manchester stuff. Any band you want to name, from Joy Division, Stone Roses, Doves. Doves are a big one. Doves are a very big one. And then from North America, I would say Elliott Smith, definitely in terms of being a singer-songwriter. Yeah, and then there's other stuff I listen to and love, but I couldn't say it's an influence because
Mm.
it's more the stuff that you would listen to um, after rehearsal. Like if I would need Public Enemy or Sigur Rós or Kasabian. When I know I don't perform any of those, not going to write any of those, but I've been in a
Hmm.
rehearsal where I'm doing a certain kind of music for 3 or 4 hours, and I just need to hear different music. I don't know. Did you
Oh
get that
yeah.
with? Comedy, do you get that where like after you've been doing like, you've been working a lot, you want to go home, you're like, I can't watch a comedy right now, or I can't watch
Yeah,
stand up.
I have like I went through kind of like phases. So the first like 5 to 7 years, I was only consuming comedy. Like it was
Mm,
only listening to comedy albums and watching comedy specials, because I just wanted to get an idea of like I know how to write things that are funny, but I kept having this obsession of like how do you know when the joke is finished? It always felt like the
right.
joke was never finished.
Yeah.
Like you can have a punchline, but then one night you'll like improv another line and you're like, it gets an even bigger laugh and you're like, oh
Mm,
man, is that the punchline now?
right,
Like
right.
you
Yeah.
gotta go back. And just like the idea of joke structure, like now I can listen to a joke and hear the premise and hear the
Hmm.
setup, and okay,
Yeah.
he's gonna misdirect us or she's gonna misdirect us
Yeah.
here, and then here comes the punchline. Hey everybody, Johnny here. Just want to take a quick second to thank our newest Patreon subscriber, CLB. I appreciate your support, and because you are subscribed to the show for just $1 a month, you're getting this episode before anyone else. If you want to be cool like CLB, head to patreon.com/TheJohnnyRogers and join in on the fun. All right, now back to the episode.
Does that ever take you out of, if you're watching a comedy special? Because I would find that with music, and then later on with getting into more writing and film and stuff, that kind of peek behind the curtain sometimes, like where it used to be like, and I would talk about this with other musicians too. It's just like it can be so hard to just be the listener again, because
Mm,
you hear this great snare drum and go, it'll take you out of the song and go, oh, how'd they get that snare drum?
yeah,
How'd they
yeah,
track that? What did they do?
yeah,
You hear a nice bass and go, what are they doing
yeah.
there? But you're just not just being the
I,
listener. Does that happen at all with
oh
like once
yeah.
you know the structure of comedy, like you're a
Yeah,
little
I'll tell
bit?
you a different industry though that it hits me more in, and I don't like that it does that, but there's no going back. The comedy though, I'll be watching a comedy special and not laugh at all,
Mm,
unless something
right.
really takes me by surprise. But
Yeah.
I'm more so like just maybe in awe, like just kind of study because
Yeah.
through all of this, through podcasting, and I produced a hip hop album in the middle of the pandemic. I've like tried every piece.
Yeah.
All that's left is painting. I gotta try painting something now. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I'm just trying
Yeah.
all of it. But when it comes to comedy, I'm such a like comedy nerd. Like I just
Mm,
love the process of writing a
yeah.
joke and be
Yeah.
like, wow, that was masterful. And then
Yeah.
try to like look at their techniques. Like how's he holding the microphone? Okay, this
Yeah.
person
Yeah.
paces
Yeah.
a lot. Is this a right time for an act out? And then I like to kind of apply those principles
Mm,
um, to my own act, basically. Like there was one, because that's how you pick up on like rules. There's all these unspoken rules in the comedy
yeah.
game that
Yeah.
you don't know about. Like if you're hosting a show and you're talking to a guy in the front row, every time he says something, you repeat what he says,
Mm,
because not only will it get a laugh, but the people in the back of the room don't necessarily know what he's saying.
right. Okay. Yeah.
They just hear
Yeah.
muffled talking. That makes
Yeah.
sense once you know that, but if you
Yeah.
don't know that, you wouldn't think to do that, right? You would just
Yeah.
have a
You
conversation
would
with
just
them.
have that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Oh,
it's
that's
more and more
clever.
little things like that that I
Yeah.
get excited when I see that, because I'm like, oh, it's going to make me look more professional now that I
Yeah.
know this,
Yeah.
right?
I
But
had
for
I have
movies,
a really good musician friend called Danny Gorman. We
mhm,
grew up together, and he lives in Montreal now. But he said to me once, he said, I miss not knowing.
mm,
And I knew exactly what he meant. Like he was trying to, like, as we, go on and on and on and write more and more songs and learn more and more, you start to learn that there's, well, this chord would sound good if it was followed by
yeah,
this, and then this should be this. And then, okay, you're going to need like a bridge section, and you're going to need this. And sometimes you listen back to like stuff you wrote when you were young and just figuring it out and be like, why did I ever go there? Like but it sounds so interesting. And you're like,
mhm,
you can't write like that again.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, it's interesting. Like, I don't think I would trade it, but you almost wish you could have like,
I
I
know
don't know,
you.
like don't know Wednesday. You
Naivete,
don't know
yeah.
Wednesdays or something. Like every Wednesday I get Men in Black with the pen, and I don't and I don't know any of
Yeah,
the
yeah,
rules.
yeah.
And I just record this stuff, and Thursday I wake up and listen to it and go, "Oh, most of this is terrible, but there's a really interesting idea in there."
You know what they
Something like
would do
that.
that is push the button on your third eye and just take some psychedelic mushrooms and
Yeah, yeah.
you
It's
just
funny.
kind
I
of
always,
reset.
yeah, I always hoped like whenever you're, getting into something a little different, that some great idea would come to you.
Oh,
And I often think that I would record stuff or write
yeah,
stuff
yeah,
down,
yeah,
and
yeah.
almost like 95% of the time, just nonsense.
It's just nonsense. But
Yeah.
that's what I like. I realized that the maybe like third or fourth time that I had taken shrooms was I was like, oh, you can't force stuff into the trip experience. Like it's just gonna be
Yeah,
whatever it's
which
gonna
is
be,
it's a
right?
very artist thing to do, isn't it? Or artist who is trying to make a career
Yeah, let
that
me
we would
get
try
something
to
out of
do.
this.
I
Yeah,
try to do it. Yeah, I try to do it with dreams. I try to think
yeah.
like, I'm gonna wake up. Like, how lazy is that? I'm gonna
Yeah.
wake up from a dream, and I've dreamt songs before. And I'll
Ah.
wake up, and immediately I'm like, I just dreamt this song, and then I'll come back to it in a few hours and go, let's listen to that dream song. It's garbage.
That's why
Or
Freddie Mercury slept under his
yeah,
piano, eh?
did he? In case he
He
had
would
an
sleep
idea,
under
or
his piano, so if
yeah,
he woke up, he'd reach back like this and just start
yeah.
playing.
Yeah,
Like so his
I think
immediate
he probably had a level of musical consciousness above what I'll ever achieve. But
Don't say
but
that.
for
He's
me it's
human just like us.
yeah, for me it's usually just yeah, the dreams don't usually do the trick. I usually have to unfortunately work at it.
Yeah, yeah. No, well,
Mm,
that's what makes it more satisfying almost too, is if you chipped away at something
yeah.
like you were
Yeah.
sculpting, you know, and then finally you see the masterpiece that's right in front of you. But one thing that I realized where I got a peek behind the curtain and it was not fun to watch anymore is
Mm,
movies.
yeah.
Movies
Yeah.
and anything like that, I cannot
Mhm.
watch it anymore because I'm like, what is that person in the background doing? Like,
Yeah.
do you know how many takes this would have been? Like this
Yeah.
30 seconds right here that we just watched would have been an all day shoot. Like it just
Yeah.
takes me right out of any
Oh,
of
I
the
yeah, I do.
entertainment.
I do. Is that ADR? I'm always like, is that ADR
Yeah.
or is that a take? And it's just all of a sudden, and it's not. So something has to be so good
Yeah.
for me to not go there. It's hard to. I think it's why a lot. I don't know if you find this. I find a lot of people in the arts who I know watch a lot of reality TV to wind down,
Mm-hmm. Which is
even though
fake
that
as well.
is exactly. It's so produced, but it's just so over the. It's because I don't know. There's not that stress to retain any of what's happened. They're gonna
Mm-hmm.
remind you in 5 minutes,
Yeah, yeah.
and
I
you
used
can
to
do
just put
other.
on The Office like that.
Right, it's something that you're familiar with, and that yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
so weird how you can just like something that's like when you just need to clear. We like I can't be challenged.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I
Mm-hmm.
can't. Like I love that first season of Westworld was so like I was in it like that.
Yeah, that
You
first season
know,
was like, this is a
Yeah.
great concept
But
they
if
have
I'd
here.
been doing something like writing all day I couldn't come home and watch an episode of Westworld for the first time. No way.
No. Yeah,
I
yeah,
didn't
yeah.
have the capacity to, it's like I just want to put on nonsense
Yeah.
that'll just like
Do
or
you tell me if you get this? Because I
yeah.
get this from time to time where I have a hard time just relaxing, especially as
Oh yeah.
like an up and
Yeah,
coming
yeah, yeah.
artist. Like
Oh
any
yeah.
moment where I'm not writing or
Mhm.
performing or
Yeah.
working towards what I love to do, I feel like guilt, like real
Guilt free.
guilt.
Yeah,
Like
and we don't allow ourselves time off, do we? We don't give
no.
ourselves, and I'm sure you have people in your life, I certainly do, who try to tell me like, don't forget, take a few days off. I'm like, a few days off?
Yeah, they're like, don't forget to take care of yourself. You're like, yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
what are you talking about? If I'm not moving the needle forward, I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
feel anxious and
yeah.
I don't feel like you said relaxed. And no, I just can't give myself time off. And the rare times I will, it would be I've just finished something and it's that rare time where I'm like, oh, I put a lot of work into that. It went well. I'm going to take tomorrow off, kind of thing. And then you quickly start thinking like, is there ever going to be another thing now?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are we going to go to
Mm-hmm.
the next thing? And yeah, I get that absolutely. And it's funny, I just got over in the last few days. I had strep throat and I was out
Damn.
for 7 to 10 days, whatever. But it was forced time off and I didn't feel guilty about it. It's
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah.
weird that we almost sometimes have to get sick to be like,
To
to
slow
not
down.
feel guilty about our time off,
Yeah.
know?
I mean, that's it shouldn't. I know that I know exactly what you mean, but I know that it
Yeah.
also shouldn't get to that point where you're like,
No.
you're
Yeah.
you can't get out of bed. Is the only
Yeah.
time that you take time for yourself. It's like,
Yeah.
I get it, but you're like, if I try to do that stuff, I just will not enjoy it. I'll just
No.
be sitting there the
No,
whole
I'm the
time
same.
going, this is a waste of
Yeah.
time.
No, I'm happiest, honestly, man, I'm happiest when there's a task at hand. And
100%. Yeah.
the more that that task is geared towards moving the needle I'd like to move forward,
Hmm.
the happier I am. And that's just something I realize when people are telling me like, take a break, take a break. Like, well, I'm actually happiest when I'm not taking a break. I'm actually happiest when I think that's part of the nice thing about doing something you love. That's really the gift of it. I think that's really the whole drive, is that when you're doing something you love, it's not, I don't feel like I'm working towards retirement.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't, and there's absolutely no disrespect to those who do. I quite admire that. You know, but I'm just not wired to, the thought of stopping terrifies me. And I've tried
Right.
it once or twice. I've tried it once or twice, and I've been miserable because I just thought, wow, I tried this music for so long, or I tried this for so long. I'm just going to find a job that rent's not a worry and things are
Yeah.
taken care of, because all this stuff. And oh, I was miserable, and my friends knew it, and my family knew it, and they're like, you're not yourself. They're like, you need to just be broke again, and
Uh,
and in your weird happy place where it's like, yeah, no, I'm happier just and you're always striving towards the two to meet. But yeah, yeah, I hear what you're saying on that. I get restless if I take a break. And the word you said, it, guilt. I feel if I give myself a day off, I feel guilt. I'm like, well, you're not where you want to be yet. And
hmm
how are you going to get to where you want to be if you're sitting, playing this silly video game on your phone,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
you're,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, so
I have to like check myself like that sometimes too, where I'm like, oh, I'll just, play this video game and it'll give me like
yeah.
that break that I needed to.
Yeah,
And I'm like,
yeah, yeah.
not, and then as soon as I'm done, again, the guilt seeps back in. It's
Yeah.
like, well, I
Oh
can't
man.
blame anyone
Yeah.
except for myself when it comes
We're
to
our
that.
own, dude, we're our own terrible boss. Like,
Oh,
we're our
yeah.
own manager. We're our own, for someone who works in that sort of setting and has a manager, we're the
Hmm.
worst manager.
But I think it's
We're the
the
get back to
pressure.
work. We're
Yeah.
the get back to work manager in our own head.
But at the same time, we're like the get back to work manager, but then also the office slacker. Like, it's like two
Yeah.
people
Yeah, yeah.
combined. Like
Yeah.
because we'll still, be able to, like I said, I'll play video games. That's me slacking off
Yeah.
from the work, and then the manager comes in and tells me, you got to get back to work. But the manager's not the one doing the work, right? Like
Yeah.
it's the slacker that needs to be
Yeah.
doing the work.
Do you ever wonder if, like, all these sort of quirks and all this, anxiousness and overthinking, all this stuff, is it kind of the trade-off for being creative? Like, I wonder that sometimes. Like, I wonder, like,
No.
could, like,
I I honestly think that being anxious and worrying is our body's way of responding to potential failure.
mm,
So like there's a small piece of you that's like this might not work.
mm,
And so
yeah,
whenever you stop working, your body starts getting that anxiety and that guilt
so
of
this will
like
definitely not work.
preparing
Yeah,
your body for what failure will feels like essentially, because that's what it
yeah,
feels like when you're having anxiety. It feels like your body is failing you,
mm,
right? And it's literally preparing you for what failure might feel like, because your brain doesn't really know the difference between the event actually happening and your mind telling it that it is
thinking about,
happening.
yeah, yeah, that's
You know,
interesting.
it
Yeah,
just reacts essentially. So
yeah.
I
I
don't think
it's funny. Most of the friends I have in the arts and creative circles, we're all, we all have our quirks, and our, I guess everybody does in
yeah.
every walk of life, but we're the ones who decide that it's worth telling other people, strangers, about publicly. And the more people willing to listen to our deepest
Yeah, yeah.
anxieties, the better. Like, the more successful we are, the more people who listen to us tapping
Yeah.
into that. So yeah.
Well, I love like the thing that makes me think that it's not part of it is so this like music album here, like it's not the greatest album that's ever been written, and but I didn't do it for that reason, you know. I didn't
Right,
do it.
right.
I didn't make that album to get signed. I didn't make that album to
Hmm.
tour. I didn't make it to even sell
Yeah,
other albums. That's the only record that exists. I made it for
yeah.
myself
Hmm.
because music was something that I had always been interested in my whole life.
Yeah.
I can't play an instrument, but I'm a writer. I
Hmm.
can
Hmm.
write lyrics to someone else's beat, someone else's music, right?
Yeah,
And create stuff that's in my head. And then it also helped me just get over like a fear of rejection, a fear of being judged. I had a big fear
mm,
of like, well, what are people going to say if I, produce X, Y, and
yeah,
Z? It just helped me get over all of that. And it was like, that was its only purpose. And now whatever happens with it from there,
yeah,
fine, you know? So I think like I never had any pressure when I wanted to write a song. I didn't feel bad taking time
yeah,
off. I was like excited when I got a chance to write another song.
yeah,
Like I did it every single day. I wrote a song.
yeah. I kind of felt like that when I transitioned sort of from music to writing, more like books and film and TV and that kind of
Hmm.
stuff, because I didn't feel like I was expected to be good at that, and I didn't feel maybe particularly good at that. I was just really interested in it. I
Mm.
just really wanted to try doing it. Whereas with the music, I felt like I was expected to be further along the track, and you should be here, and you should be here, and you should be here. And when I say I was expected to be that, that's myself holding myself to
Yeah.
that. That's not other people. I had wonderful people in my life. No one was like, you should be further along the track, now and then, but they were probably right. But in general, it was me saying, you should be further along the track with music. So there'd be a lot of pressure there. And then switching to writing, I didn't feel, I said, I just like storytelling. Much that you
Hmm.
said you're a writer, music is an interesting medium for this, interesting genre for that. Yeah, that resonates with me for sure.
Yeah, man. There's one question that I love asking people, and so I'm going to
Yeah.
ask us here too, is if you could make a phone call to
Mm.
15-year-old Darryl, separate timeline, it doesn't even affect your current
Yeah.
timeline, so no stock advice or anything like that, buy
Yeah.
crypto.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you could
Yeah.
give that 15-year-old kid just a piece of advice, what would you say?
Oh, be kinder to people. Be nicer. I think I was an angry 15-year-old. Um, and I would say you're not you yet. I think of 15-year-old me, and I think of me now, and I'm like, that's not who you can be angry when you're 15, when you're going through stuff, and you don't know how to process it, and
Hmm.
maybe there weren't the resources then that there are now. I think there are. I think we're coming around to that, where even if it's just you live in small town, who knows where, and now you have the internet, and that's pretty good. Though maybe there's also probably bad advice on the internet too. But
Only look
and
for
I
good
did have good
advice.
and I did have good support systems when I was 15. I had friends and family who were good for that, but I don't know that you always know that when you're 15. And I don't always I don't know that you're ever comfortable going to people, but less so at 15. Everything's changing, everything's so strange. And for me, a lot of it came out angry, and I think some of it came out not always so nice. Um, I think I would tell myself to be a bit nicer, because I do think I had elements of kindness. I think it was in there. I think it is who I am. But when you're 15, it can be hard to, it's just,
Hmm.
you're just wound tight. And I would have really begged myself to have patience. And then 15-year-old me would have told this incredibly old me phoning him to F off, and would have just, it would have been awful, man. 15-year-old me would
You're like,
hate,
yeah, okay, sure, you're from the future.
yeah, 15-year-old me would despise old me calling up and just being like, no, there's no way. He would just want to know, did we do this? Did we do this? And be like, no,
Hmm.
no. Do we have this? Do we have this? No, we don't have any of the things we discussed. We don't have any of the 15-year-old goals
Yeah, so
that,
listen to what I'm saying.
yeah, yeah. No, so I would try to tell myself, like, have patience, have empathy, be kind. You will become these things in time. And knowing the full time that 15-year-old me was probably not gonna listen.
Yeah, yeah. But I
Yeah.
think there are some things where people maybe say them to you when you're younger and you don't really take it seriously then, but it
Mhm.
kind of manifests in a weird way.
Yeah.
And
I
you
wish
got
I could tell myself to enjoy some of the. You know what? Here's one. I think that I would really try to get it to myself that you are about to do some really amazing things that, but you're going to be very caught up in what's the next thing. You're
mm,
not going to be enjoying that thing. And I think that I bet that that's very common for people as they get older, that you wished you enjoyed some of the really great moments rather than just. I think I got to do a lot of really exciting, fun stuff young and just assumed, not quite 15, but well, but just quite assumed like, well, that's how it's going to be. Life's going to be
yeah.
awesome. You know,
Yeah.
this is great. Rather than being like, whoa, you got to take a step back and go. Yeah, I think you hear athletes talk about this a lot, which I am not. I like my beer league hockey and everything, but
Yeah.
it's about the extent of it. But you hear athletes talk a lot about they wish they'd enjoyed just the existence of being a
Hmm.
professional athlete, enjoying that their body still worked,
Yeah.
that they were around some of their best friends, that they were young, that they were traveling in planes to different cities to play a game, and that it's not till they retire that they realize, oh, just the little things like the morning skate or being in the dressing room or being around colleagues and being around this stuff and having a back that didn't hurt every day kind of thing. I think you hear
Yeah.
them talk about that a lot. They sort of have that very obvious contrast of before and after. But yeah, maybe I would tell myself, yeah, be a bit kinder, have patience and empathy, and try to appreciate the things you're about to do because you're going to look back and go, whew, I'd like another run at that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, on the flip side of things, this is a
Hmm.
newer question that I added on the
Yeah.
reverse
Yeah.
side, is
Yeah.
because these videos are a bit of a time capsule, I want to leave a message for 60-year-old
Okay.
old kid.
Yeah. Um, I think I'm doing a good job with kindness and empathy. I'd be surprised if I got to 60 and went, you didn't figure that one out. Um, I bet 60-year-old me is going to scream down the phone at me right now to please see the dentist more.
The virtual
100%. I
reality.
know it. No, I know it's in the mail. Like I know like things like that we like take better care of your teeth. You hear that one. Yeah, isn't that interesting how the other one you can go on forever and this one is
Yeah.
just like,
And now you're
I don't
like
know, take
leaving a
better care of
message
your.
for your future self. Like, I hope you took better care of your teeth. By
I'm
I
not
hope you
gonna
got all
do
your
it. I'm
teeth
not
by
gonna do it.
60. You know what I
Go
mean?
to the
Like,
dentist and all this.
yeah,
Well, if they
yeah.
pass because I'm in, I think we're both in Ontario, are we?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's in the mail maybe this is federal, I can't remember, but I think the universal dental care is in the mail. And I think that's important to people in the arts and comedians and
Huge, man.
musicians that's a big thing for us because I've had to sell things before to go to the dentist, because like, and we're just talking about emergency dentistry.
Yeah,
We're not talking about
you're
like,
preaching to the choir when it comes to this
yeah, I need
stuff.
my
I know
teeth cleaned. I
exactly.
think, yeah. So, but I think 60-year-old me might call down the phone and be like, no, you went to the pub. Here's 3 days you went to the pub.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the dentist visit you needed, but you had to go to the pub, or you had to buy this
Yeah.
stupid extra thing for hockey or guitar or
Yeah, yeah.
sweater, or you had to do this dumb thing, and now you're paying for it. So it's far less romantic than the 15-year-old question, the 60-year-old question, isn't it? But I bet it, I bet it would be because I think we get more pragmatic. And I
yeah,
just
yeah.
imagine 60-year-old me is probably going to have more pragmatic advice than sort of right in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
middle where I'm speaking to hot-headed 15-year-old me. And now I'm like, oh, here's what you got to do, me. 60-year-old me is
No,
going to
no.
be like, Don't do any of those things. Get better at your taxes. Look
Yeah.
after your teeth. You know,
I
things
like
that I
this.
do think-
I think I miscommunicated the question, but I like the way you answered it better. So I was
Right.
more so looking at it as like a time capsule, like a message you leave from now for your 60-year-old self.
Oh.
Like I hope you did this by now, or like, but I like what
okay,
you
yeah.
I like what you did though, where you did it from
thought we
the
were going the other way.
perspective of the 60-year-old to
60-year-old.
tell you now what you have to do. Like that.
Oh,
That to
yeah.
me seems more impactful. So I might change the question.
Okay. Yeah, time capsule me is gonna leave myself the message. Also to make sure I'm doing a good job of enjoying the moments.
Yeah.
I think I'm doing better at that. But I'm just spend all the time I can with the people who mean the most. My two nephews, Elliot and Arthur, my sister, my dad, my brother-in-law, Robbie, and then just all the friends I've been so lucky to make. Just start really prioritizing time with them and make sure that whatever I'm working on, it doesn't become so much that I forget that the main thing is time spent with them.
Yeah,
I think I'll hit
1000%.
that goal. I think that's, but yeah, that's the time. I'll be like, I hope you spent enough time with the people who deserve it. So yeah, that would be that message. That was
I
better
love
than the
that, man.
teeth. That's better than the
Yeah. No, the teeth one is a good message. People
Yeah,
need to
yeah.
realize they need to take care of their damn teeth and how hard it is for people here in Canada. I'm going to
Yeah.
fire off your social media stuff. Everyone go
All right, I
follow
see it.
Darryl Webster on Instagram, or you can look up Old Kid. You got Spotify as well with some great music. Oh, it might bring up a separate page. I'm trying to pull up your Spotify and it's going to show something else.
Nah, that's all right.
There we go. Yeah. So your latest album is Tell Me Everything. Do you have another album on the way that you're
Yeah, I think
thinking
so.
about?
Yeah, so I work with I'm on Maison of Music in Hamilton, and they are working on, I don't know how much they're saying this yet, so I won't say all the news. But they already have a bit of a recording setup, but I would say that they are expanding on their
Nice.
on that, and I'm pretty excited about that. So it'll either be 2023 or 2024. But we are working on something, and I balance that against the sort of film and TV work I do as well. So
Nice.
I think deep down, like I really, if somebody, Frankie Sharp Records came along and said, "Hey, I need you to just do music," I'd be like, "Okay, I'll do it."
Yeah,
But
like sign me up. man.
yeah, but I think the probably the film and TV stuff are sort of helping keep the lights on as well. So you gotta keep doing, and I do enjoy it, but sometimes the music, I thought we were going to do an album this year, and I started working on I was very lucky to be on a hockey documentary.
Oh,
That was
nice.
just the most fun this year to work with friends on it and this kind of thing. But it meant choosing one or the other, because you would have done both.
You do a
you would have been-
half-ass job on both.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, and I never want to do that. So I
No.
went fully into that for 2022, but I would love in, next year or the year after to get another album going. And the nice thing is, in the meantime, you're writing songs, so you're not just like, okay, I got 10 new songs, here's an album.
Yeah.
Now, if I wait a couple of years, you might have, again, that patience thing that I would never have had before.
Patience is huge, especially when it comes to picking the right songs for your albums. But
Yeah.
there's tons of music on Spotify that people can listen to. Go follow Old Kid on Instagram. I put all those links in the description below.
That's awesome.
But
That's kind of you.
yeah, man. I hope that this gives you a little bump, and I'll have a clip out as well with promoting the podcast, but it'll be up Sunday at 7.
Awesome, man. See your local dentist, everybody.
Yeah, that's
Get your jibs looked
that's our
at.
Bob Barker sign off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And
Don't forget to
get your cavities
teeth
checked.
cleaned. Yeah, exactly.
All right, man. It was great meeting you. I hope you have a good night.
You will, man. Take it easy.
All right. See you, everybody. You've been listening to The Johnny Rogers Show. New episodes air every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.